okay, let's get rid of that one.
That was fantastic. I actually got a little bit emotional because that was really so beautiful. Thank you so much. That was such a beautiful introduction. I wasn't expecting it to be quite so amazing. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'll send you that end graphic if you like.
Yes, that would be amazing.
Alrighty, I love doing that because it's just so like it's something special for you, and it's like this. That's why I'm like, come on, give me your pictures now.
Yes, I understand why. You did a lot of work on it. I appreciate the time and effort that went into doing that. Thank you so much. That's beautiful.
My absolute pleasure. As a creative, this is one of the things that I do for love. And it's the love of, my guests, it's the love of my community. Sorry, just adjusting my hips, so I'm stretching them out a little bit more. All right, so welcome to those of you who are joining us today for Tasty Tuesdays, the community chat. And tonight I have my beautiful guest, Kira Kyusu.
Kyusu.
Thank you. Time I have said your name, I've said it.
It's okay.
Oh dear. Who have we got joining us today? Hi, Cindy.
Hello, Cindy.
Cindy's saying I'm crackling with my sound. Am I still crackly?
It's crackly a little bit, but it's not as bad as it was before. So I think it might be as good as we're going to get it.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. Cindy's used to me on these podcasts. So she's like, Lorene, what's going on?
Oh, regular, yes. I think we might be having some weather issues. Yes.
Yes, exactly. It's like, oh Lordy. Hopefully it's not too terribly bad right now. So, okie dokie. So Kira does somatic healing, and I am new to this concept, and so I was really curious to have you on because I was like, "Ooh, this sounds really interesting." And being that I have this amazing platform to deal with and play with, I'm so very fortunate to have that.
Yes.
And so I get to play with loads of different people, including yourself, and find out all sorts of new and fun pieces of information.
How exciting.
I know, right? So please tell me, Kira, in your words, what is somatic healing? And then we can go sort of jump backwards after that and have a little
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I'm so glad you asked. How would I best describe it? Somatic healing uses the mind and the body and verbal communication guided and facilitated by someone who has done it before. So if you think of psychologists and psychiatrists, they use purely verbal communication to work through trauma, whereas somatic healing uses the mind and the body to tap into trauma that is stored in the body, because there is a certain amount of memories, traumatic memories, that we can't access consciously on our own. Understandably, because they're traumatic, our mind blocks it out. Or if you think of this as a regular memory, say us going for a cup of tea, you can access it, you can see it, you can visualize it, you can feel it, you can go back and see it anytime. This is a trauma memory, and there's a part in our brain that comes along, and if it's too much to handle, it'll come along and it'll smash it up, and it will be scattered throughout our brain. So it might be sight, sound, smell, touch, whatever, and it's all around our head. So we're out in the world and we might smell something, we might be triggered. We don't know what it's come from. We don't know where it is. We just know that something's come up. We might get a bit of anxiety. We might feel something. We don't know why. We just know that this smell means something to us. We don't like it. We want to run from it. We feel fear. Or it could be the same with taste. It could be someone, just gently brushing us in the supermarket. So this memory is throughout our brain. And just verbally talking about trauma can be quite triggering. But what somatic healing does, it brings this memory that is scattered throughout our mind back into one whole memory, and then we can heal it.
Wow.
Then we can heal it. And it's really quite beautiful, because I have had, it was only when I was 33 that I realized I had a lot of trauma. I looked back on my life and I couldn't remember most of my childhood, most of it. And I, through somatic healing, I got in touch with these parts of, I unlocked these memories that I couldn't remember, and I saw the trauma that was there through getting in touch with my inner child. And I healed these parts of myself, because it's stored in my body. Even though I can't consciously remember it, there are parts in my body. I feel pain, I feel aches, I feel anxious, I feel tired. All these sorts of things. It's still there. It's sitting inside of me. This trauma is in my body, but I can't access it consciously as an adult today.
Wow.
Yes.
What absolutely fascinating concept of like the splitting up of the memory, the trauma. It's like I've never heard of it referred in that way. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for doing this work, because it's incredibly complementary to the stuff that I do too. So it's like, that is so cool. That's super, super cool. So you mentioned that, you were around 33 and you sort of started on this journey. So was that where your spiritual journey began, or was it a bit before that? Like, tell us a little bit more about your spiritual journey.
Thank you so much for asking. I was 26 when I realized I couldn't stop drinking. So I'm an alcoholic in recovery. I started drinking when I was 14, and I didn't realize I had a problem, because people around me drank as I did. And it was quite normalized, in Australian culture, in most cultures, to drink, quite heavily. And my friends were drinking quite heavily. I never saw it as an issue. No one ever kind of said to me, hey, maybe this isn't okay. I was just given alcohol. By the time I was 26, I was a daily blackout drunk. I was drinking 4 or 5 liters of cask wine a day. I could not go one day, literally, or even, hours without picking up a drink. It was an obsession. I needed it like air. It was my best friend, but also my worst enemy. And my life started crumbling around me, and I knew that somewhere deep in my soul, I wanted something better for myself, but I didn't know how to do it, because this had become everything. I took alcohol into the shower. I took it shopping. I took it to the movies, on the bus, to and from work, everywhere. Not to work, sorry, on the way home from work, but it was, and then increased into morning time. And I couldn't stop it on my own. And someone introduced me to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. But prior to that, I remember looking up at the stars and going, higher power, God, whatever you are, please either kill me or help me, because I can't live like this anymore. And I feel like for me, consciously, that's where it started. Consciously, that's where I started reaching out to a manifestation, a power, the universe, Mother Nature, whatever it is. I don't need to intellectualize it. I just know that it's there. This beautiful guiding angel spirit, higher power, that loves and cares about me and wants the best for me, was there holding my hand saying, I'm going to help you. And that was 2014. That's 2014. And that's when I started my sobriety journey. And I feel like that's when it really started to manifest and take off.
Wow. And how did that continue on, for you to get into eventually somatic healing? So how did that sort of unfold for you?
Into somatic healing? It's a beautiful question. It's a really beautiful question. I was several years sober in this program, and I was doing everything that they suggested, and it's a beautiful program for looking at addiction, and I love that. It helped me at the time. It really helped me at the time. Like, they loved me when I couldn't love myself, and they helped me stop drinking when I really needed it, when I was at the crux of it. But several years on, I was in sobriety, and once addiction is put down, all of these feelings, all of these wounds, all of this trauma wants to come out, because I'm not numbing it with the alcohol, and that could be anything. That could be sex, that could be gambling, that could be TV, it could be porn, it could be sugar, it could be any number of things. But for me, it was alcohol. Once I put that down and stopped numbing all my feelings, stopped numbing all my thoughts, stopped using it to help me get to sleep, everything started surfacing. And this program didn't have space for trauma. And that's fair enough. They're there for addiction, but addiction is up here and trauma is here. Trauma is the core of it. Trauma is the reason why addiction happens. And my trauma wanted to come out. My trauma was bursting out of me. I just didn't really know or understand that. And I got to the point where my body and my mind started shutting down. I was in a fearful state. I was isolating. I was living from my bed to my couch. I could barely move. All I did was go out to health appointments or get, go out for supplies, for food. And I was just obsessed with wanting to end my life. And I would Google ways, and what stopped me was, if I take all this medication and it doesn't work, then I'm not going to get my medication again, and I need my medication. And that's really sad to think that, I didn't feel that my life was really worth living. I was so scared of my own mind that I couldn't trust myself, that I didn't feel worthy of living. And what I ended up, someone introduced me to a somatic psychotherapist who does somatic healing, and she introduced me to somatic healing. And I ended up, getting in touch with my inner child and being introduced to ACA, which is another program, 12-step program, which deals with trauma, adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. They introduced me to my inner child, and this psychotherapist introduced me to somatic healing, and the two kind of interlocked. And I met my inner child. And it was, for me, the most beautiful experience I've ever had in my entire life, because once I had tapped into that and felt what my inner child had felt, being abused as a child, I started to feel differently towards myself. I started to see where everything came from, feeling worthless, feeling inadequate, feeling like I can't speak up for myself, feeling like I need to be a people pleaser. Why am I attracted to people who don't treat me right? All of these sorts of things I started to identify in my childhood from my family of origin. And with this somatic healing, I was able to go into there and love this child like I was meant to be loved, but my parents didn't give to me. And by freeing all this trauma from my body, it was miraculous. It was absolutely miraculous. The pain from my body started leaving. I started growing this love in my heart. I started feeling more like a worthy human being, like I am enough, like I deserve living, I can do anything. And it started growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. And I would spend hours and hours and hours and hours with my inner child, just loving her, giving myself the love that I deserved, but I didn't get as a child. And after doing that for a long period of time, I started writing a book, and I've written a book. It's yet to be published. It's really fantastic. But it's just something that I want to pass on to people, and I want anyone to be able to have access to. I want to be able to share this with anyone, because everyone is worthy of it. Everyone is worthy of love. Everyone is worthy of feeling enough. Everyone is worthy of their own love. That's the message I want to give out.
You speak into my heart, hon. I'm like, yeah, I hear you. I hear you and I see you.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
Along this journey, like, have you created or discovered for yourself what consciousness means to you?
Yes. This is really important to me, actually. The psychotherapist that I saw, she diagnosed me with complex PTSD, and I had seen quite a few different people in the past, and they had never mentioned anything like this to me. And that diagnosis was actually so freeing and so liberating, because once there's a diagnosis, or once there's a knowing, then there can be action taken, or there can be a solution. But without an understanding of it, I felt like I was running around the world like a crazy person. Once I understood that I had complex PTSD, and then started to understand where it came from, which was my childhood trauma, I could start to understand how to heal it. So for me, consciousness means living in the present moment. Complex PTSD wants to take me away from the present moment all the time. It wants to take me back into trauma all the time. It wants to create drama in my mind. It wants to pull me back into an emotional flashback of some sort that happened in my childhood. And that's not always knowing. I don't always know what that is, and that comes from how I remember how I said the smashing of the memory. I can smell something, I can hear something, I can touch something, taste something. So everywhere, every day, I'm constantly triggered. So my mind is constantly thinking, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. I smell this, I hear this, my mind, all that chatter, all that constant chatter. I need to be, I need to do, I need to complex PTSD. So living in the now and learning to control the complex PTSD rather than it controlling me is a new way of living, because for 33 years or so, I lived in the emotional flashback, in the wounding, and not knowing that I was doing it. I couldn't settle, I couldn't calm. I was constantly either living in the past or projecting into the future.
Yeah, wow. I love that. And I certainly know in my work and in my life experience, I have also had my second husband's dad was a Vietnam veteran. And he had severe PTSD. And we lived with him and his mum, like my partner's mum, for 2-3 month bursts out of our relationship, and it was tough. It was really tough emotionally for me, being empathic and stuff, and I was just so aware. Without that was sort of before my real healing, like stepping into this like healing consciousness journey. I was in the beginning stages of it, but not to the extent that I live now. And just hearing him waking up at 4:00 in the morning with night terrors, and that sort of stuff, and knowing that if something triggered him, he would just go into his shell, he'd go to bed, so I've seen it from an outsider's perspective. I've also seen the effect of him having PTSD, of how that affected his family. So his two children, one of them being my partner, hi Brooke, and his wife, and the extended family, and how it became one of those things where the people around him, not me, because I'd come from a really different style of background, but also I had a background in working with people with disabilities where we didn't treat people as if they had a disability.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't mollycoddle people. Whereas because of his PTSD and everybody else was in so much trauma around that PTSD, they all were like eggshells around him whenever he was like having a moment. And it was just like, so as a result, nothing changed. Nothing moved. And he had like full rule over the roost, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So because everybody was too scared about upsetting him. And then along comes me, who's just like, I respect you, and no, you're not going to treat people like that, and you're not going to treat me like that, and you're not going to treat my husband like that. It's not going to happen. Back off, buddy.
Beautiful. Yes.
So I was laying boundaries where other people hadn't laid boundaries before. And we had a respect for each other. At the end of the day, I know that he probably would have, been okay with helping me out at any time, and same vice versa. But there was boundaries, and because I had the strength within to say no, when my husband and I did split, he was then left with the empowerment of going, oh shit, if she can stand up to my dad, well, so can I. And so he did, and he started doing it in a really healthy way instead of a drunk way.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. That's so empowering. So brave.
So I certainly comprehend the many variable aspects of PTSD. And I know there was a little bit in my history as well, with my first marriage ending very suddenly. I was married to somebody who had borderline personality disorder, who was a gaslighter and a narcissist.
Yes, I know a lot about that. Yes.
So when that marriage ended very suddenly, and I mean like over a 3-hour conversation,
I'm so sorry that happened.
I'm not. I'm glad it happened.
I'm sorry it was traumatic. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it was one of those, I used to call it my implosion moment, but in a lot of ways it was actually an explosion. Because, well, that current life totally imploded. 100%, it was gone. I had no job, no husband, no house, no cat, no nothing. I had no income. I had nothing. I had a whole bunch of debt and nothing else to show for it. And I was just like, what the fuck do I do now? And I couldn't. My concentration levels were gone. Like I couldn't. Initially, it lasted for about 2 to 3 weeks. And I was having night terrors. I was waking up in the middle of the night, kneeling on my bed, clutching at the walls because I thought they were going to fall in on me, screaming. And after 2 weeks of this and not being able to sleep, I went up to the doctor and I was like, I have to get something to help me to sleep. And he goes, have you been having suicidal thoughts? And I'm like, if I don't get some sleep, I will. And he tried, and this is one of those moments where you have to have, even at that stage where I was exhausted, but I knew within myself exactly what I required, which was something to help me sleep. And this doctor was trying to get me onto antidepressants, and I was just like, I'm not having antidepressants. I don't require antidepressants. I require sleep so my body can freaking process. My body can't process.
Hello, Timothy.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to stop talking and get back to you.
Oh, no. I'm so loving hearing you.
I'm still crackly. So, yeah. Unless Oh, I don't know if I can risk it. No, I'm not going to.
And I'm so sorry to hear that you went through that. It sounds really horrible and really stressful. And there is there's a good percentage of the world that is undiagnosed with complex PTSD, and that is also what I really want to highlight and I guess bring to attention. Not that I'm trying to fix or control, but I want people just to know that there is hope and there is help, because I have tried Googling help for complex PTSD, and there is help for vets, but and understandably so, but there isn't a lot of help for other people with PTSD and complex PTSD. And complex PTSD very much does starts from childhood, and that is I don't feel there's enough emphasis on childhood trauma and childhood protection, and looking at childhood abuse and childhood trauma. And there are all these buzzwords that people don't want to I suppose accept and acknowledge, and that's really understandable, because they're very deep. It's very painful, and but without doing it, the cycle continues. And that's really unfortunate, and that's really sad. And I'm really grateful that I have had some really wonderful people reaching out to me for support, and I feel really blessed. I feel really incredibly blessed that people are opening their hearts and their minds and willingness to go with this experience and let me guide them through this, because my philosophy is I want to help others help themselves, because I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a somatic healer. I want to guide people to manifest this own love and this own healing within themselves. I think it's really important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I'm so grateful that you've created this and providing the service for people. It is very much required. And
Okay. Yeah, you got
that better?
Yeah. Yeah.
Change the course. Does that make it feel better for everybody out there too? I don't know. Technology, it's a wonderful thing.
It happens. Technology is so technology. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's great, Yeah.
So one of the things that was popping into my mind as you're talking is so often they're just kids, they don't know what's going on.
They're just kids, they don't know what's going on. And what did you say just before that? Sorry?
So that's the thing that's sort of popping into my mind, was to do with
childhood trauma.
Kids don't know what's going on.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Don't know the words.
I'm so sorry, it cut out. They're just kids, they don't know what's going on.
What is happening with my sound today? This is awesome.
You're doing your best.
I don't know about that.
Not your fault. Hi, Vienna. Welcome. That's right, Timothy. Yes, I agree. Everything we need to heal already exists inside us. People just need to be guided. Yeah. And I feel very strongly that being guided by someone compassionate and understanding is very important, because I've been to a few people that haven't had the empathetic side or the understanding side, and it hasn't been it hasn't been a nice experience, and it's actually been more traumatic than it has helpful. And that's why I try to be as nurturing as possible, and especially because I've been through this, and I've been through my own somatic healing. I understand that the level of gentleness and ease required into this is really very fundamental to for this to thrive and be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that better on the?
Yeah, it's okay. It keeps cutting out. But yeah, we'll try. Maybe if I can just get your question out, then I can try and answer it.
All right. So, what is just deviate just slightly? What is your most tasty moment?
My most tasty moment. Oh my gosh! And I was thinking about this, and it's. I'm not going to say rude or naughty. I think we're all adults, so I'm going to go with it because I think we can all handle it. Because there has been so much sexual abuse in my life. I want to be gentle with saying this because I understand that, people may be triggered, but I also want to speak my truth. I was brought up in a cult, and I was factoried out as a child from a really young age. So I didn't really understand the difference between consensual sex. Yes, I can hear. Yeah. Consensual. That's much better. I didn't really understand the difference between consensual sex and non-consensual sex. So I ended up in a lot of relationships that there was a lot of rape. And so after I hit this catalyst, this spiritual, mental, physical, spiritual breakdown, after working through all this trauma and being able to release my mind and my body of, all this negative incoming that's constantly, attacking me, releasing the trauma from my mind and my body. I didn't really ever experience much sexual pleasure before this catalyst. But after working through all of this stuff, I reached this point where I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I would hide when I would want to shower. I didn't want to be touched, all these sorts of things, understandably, because of what I've been through. But then when I worked through everything with my inner child, and I spoke to her and loved her through all her wounds, my intimacy with myself and my own personal pleasure in my own time, and my sexual pleasure with other people is unlike anything I've ever experienced. The connection that I can share with someone is incredibly beautiful, and my own pleasure as a woman, which I deserve, which I never even knew that I deserved before, is so heightened and so incredible. It's quite magical, and so that would be tasty. But I say magical. I say magical, but I put that down as the answer for the tasty comment, because I think everyone is really deserving of that. And not a lot of people, I think, especially women, understand that they have that right to they have that right to pleasure. They have that right to feel equal, to feel loved, to feel intimate, to feel all those incredible things that a lot of people miss out on. And I, for so many years, I didn't know that I was allowed to have boundaries. I didn't know that I was allowed to, so much. And it's changed so fundamentally in ways that I can't explain. Like, I go to another place, I would say almost enlightenment, which is just, really quite special.
Absolutely. And hopefully now
We are
Your
good
sound.
on the audio.
It's amazing. Yes.
Oh, my sincerest apologies, everybody. With the moving around of ports and things, it went back to old settings, and
You've done great. You've done
so I do
great.
apologize. Timothy, sensuality in all of its aspects is linked to abundance and manifesting abundance. So we all deserve this. Yes. And of course, there is a really big difference between sensuality and sexuality. In that you don't have to be intimately copulating with someone else to have sensuality. And quite often with trauma, especially sexual trauma, the first place you have to find that sensuality is within, with this beautiful vessel that you have. And once you find that and are managed to complete that within yourself, then you're able to share it. Otherwise, you end up in codependent relationships, which is never healthy.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I love that you brought that up, because what I discovered in codependency, because my friend called me, codependent when I was 21, and I had no idea what this word even meant, but I was very enmeshed with my toxic partner at the time. Years down the track, before this catalyst that I mentioned, my spiritual rock bottom, I came to finally understand what codependency was. And I'm so grateful. And this is also what led me into the somatic healing. And what I learned is that the codependency, I had always been seeking the love from my mother and father that I never received as a child. I had been seeking it in these relationships, never getting it, the fear of abandonment, the fear of the lacking of love, because I essentially have a love deficit. I wasn't born with this love deficit. I was born a beautiful child, seeking nurture and guidance and love, and sustainability. But due to their lack of self-love, they couldn't give me what I needed. And so my whole life I had been searching outside of myself, and especially through people, to find essentially a surrogate mother or a surrogate father. And I didn't understand that. I thought, why didn't this man love me enough? Why doesn't this woman treat me better? Why aren't I their favorite? Validation, praise from other people. And what somatic healing does is it restores the love inside of me, and I can give it to myself. So I no longer need to seek it outside of me, which is the most incredible thing in the world. Incredible thing. I can be that loving parent to myself, and that person that that love that I was always seeking, that I never received as a child, I now give to myself. I don't need to find it in other people or other people, places and things, which is really special.
Oh, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. I do remember, hi Michael.
Hi.
I do remember back when my most serious part of like the jump into where I'm at now began was in between two pregnancies, and we were struggling to get pregnant the second time, and I just knew within that this wasn't something that medication could fix. It wasn't something like that. It was a internal energetic issue. I was blocked up energetically and emotionally. And I knew that. Like, even though, like, at that stage, I had done a bit of work with Ina Segal, and I'd done a little bit of stuff with Law of Attraction, but not a hell of a lot more than that. I hadn't really, I'd sort of knew to trust my gut slightly, but it was like still very much in those beginning tottering stages. And this lady, she came in for the very first session, and I didn't, of getting my access bars run. And I didn't do any research into it at all. One of my friends who I trusted said, this thing's I've heard a bit about it and don't know, I've never had it, but it's popping into my mind to tell you. So perhaps see if you can get your bars run, your access bars run. And so I was like, Googled up this lady. She came to my house. She ran my bars. And I remember sitting up after, and I hadn't told her anything about the pregnancies or anything. sat up on the table afterwards, and I just sat there like this. I was like, oh my gosh. And she's like, what, are you okay? And I was like, yeah. It's like every single cell of my body is happy. I have never felt that before, ever, in my whole entire life. And I was just like, I was sitting there just absolutely dumbfounded that this is what happiness feels like. Oh my goodness. How, wow. Okay. I think I'd like more of that. Thanks.
That's amazing. Oh, thanks for sharing that. That's so beautiful.
Yeah. And this is part of why Tasty Tuesdays exists. Because I didn't go through that process at that time, both the loss, the healing, the grief, the healing, the processing. I know that this platform wouldn't exist now for me, to be able to connect with incredible people like yourself, to be able to allow more people out there to be able to see what you do, so that then they can go, oh, that really speaks to me. It speaks to my heart. I think I could really use that service too. You know, I think if I had your services back, 5-7 years ago, around that same time that I found out what access bars was, gosh, that would have made my life so much easier.
Thank you so much for saying that.
Because there is so much childhood trauma that I have processed over these last 7 years, and it is hard sometimes, and it's confronting, and it makes you cry, and it makes you angry sometimes, and it's like, and when you've been somebody who's been trying to squash down the anger and have it like this facade of, hi, I'm good, hi, I'm happy, hi, yeah, I'm all bubbly, everything's okay.
That's right.
Yeah, underneath all of that was so much trapped anger and rage and fury and hate about my childhood and how everything rocked through there, that I had never ever fucking processed. Because as I was saying before, when my words are all crackly, so often parents go, it's okay, kids don't understand. They don't know what's going on. And they don't have those healthy, emotional conversations with their kids to explain, why are mum and dad splitting up? Why are we suddenly moving house and moving to a whole different town, and where I don't know anybody except my grandparents? And why am I suddenly moving from the city to the country? And why is my family now being split up? I thought everything was okay, and now it's not. And why did I have to go and be at another school for a while? And
Absolutely. I hear you completely. And it is really unfair. And kids do understand a lot. And whether they understand or, are consciously sometimes talked to or not, there can still be some really ingrained abandonment wounds that stay with them, because there can still be a lot of fear. There can still be a lot of fear around these things. And a lot of shaming. There's a lot of shaming in childhood that is not recognized, and kids aren't taught what shame is. So it grows into adulthood, and people think it's okay. These subtle shaming things that start in childhood from a very young age, before we can even walk or talk. Why can't you be better? Why can't you walk sooner? Why can't you do this? Why aren't you potty training sooner? Why is your hair like this? Why? This is all shame. This is all shame that children are, taught from such a young age. Shame and abandonment are two of the biggest things that cause complex PTSD, that are not talked about enough, that are not held enough, not loved enough, not talked about enough, not explored enough, not cared for enough, that manifests in so many people. It It's really unfortunate and it's really sad. And it is really hard to look at and sit with. And feelings, who fucking wants to feel feelings, like who wants to feel feelings? Feelings can get fucked, right? But at the end of the day, who wants to die of cancer? Who wants to die of, liver disease? Who wants to die of, all these sorts of things, which is what trauma can cause.
Yeah.
It's just not really talked about. They say, it comes from this and it comes from that. But no one talks about the trauma aspect of it, which is what it can manifest into. Like you said, all of this anger and this grief and this stuff that we suppress and we shove into our bodies, which is why I couldn't move from my bed to my couch. I couldn't take care of me because I had all this stuff, all this, that was like built into my body that I just didn't know was there. And once I released it, like, you've seen my Facebook, I'm dancing and I'm doing all these beautiful, wonderful things now, which is, as soon as someone's willing to look at this stuff, their world just opens up and explodes, as you would know, because you've done it too, which is just incredible.
Oh, Timothy. So I'd just like to jump back a couple of comments. And he said that codependency, a lot of people don't realize that the word codependency in relationships originally comes from the model of drug addiction codependency. And I totally agree. Yeah.
Yes.
But again, anything that we use to keep ourselves from being complete and distracted is something that we can be it can be addicted to, as Kira mentioned at the beginning, like earlier in the chat, of, we can use things like porn or sex or shopping or these days social media, gambling, obviously drugs and alcohol. For me, it was probably relationships was my addiction. Between relationships, and then it became food. Sort of those two came in together. And I have to say, probably food is the worst thing to be addicted to because you still have to have it to survive. So it's a very hard one to break.
It is a very challenging one. And the disease of alcoholism, the dis-ease, I was in Alcoholics Anonymous for quite some time, and they told me how, I was an alcoholic, but they didn't explain to me why I was an alcoholic or where it came from. And what I learnt in ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, is that it was actually passed on to me generationally. So I was born with this internal drug store. I was already an alcoholic before I picked up a drink. My father was an alcoholic. My mother became the para-alcoholic, who is the codependency. She took on the traits of the alcoholic, even though she didn't touch a drink. And then they passed on to me through fear, through drama, through all these toxic behaviors. So as a child, I was already fearful, hypervigilant, all these behaviors, self-harming, all these sorts of things. And getting adrenaline and all these drug hits through fear, adrenaline, all these sorts of things I was already hyped up on long before I picked up anything. And so by the time I picked up alcohol, I was already an alcoholic. It's just that ended up being my drug of thing that I got addicted to. I was already self-harming. I was already shoplifting. I was already doing a whole variety of things. It was already in my system as a child, long before I picked up anything. And it's really explained really very well in this fellowship that I'm in now, like in these books that I'm reading. And it's quite phenomenal. It's quite phenomenal to understand it all.
I love that you have a support network that works, or a support program that works for you. I know a lot of people struggle with Alcoholics Anonymous. So thank you for bringing another
ACA.
Structure, another group, another pathway for them to follow, or maybe join, see if it would work for them. So thank you for bringing that to the audience. And to, maybe it's not my audience directly, but maybe it's somebody that they know.
Yes.
And and that is struggling out there. I can think of a couple of people that I know that struggle and with this sort of stuff, and they're doing a lot of really great work, but at the same time, it's like one particular person I can think of is now coming to me going, oh, hey, there's this Indian guru dude who has all these really cool things to say. And I'm just like going, that is awesome, dude. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing this with me, because he's at the point of choosing to move forward. And then the next conversation is something around, as somebody who's been a friend for a really long time, but are still going around and around and around on the same Ferris wheel, on the same hamster wheel of conversations and trauma and behaviors and stuff. And he's just like, I don't think I can be friends with them anymore. And I'm like going,
yeah, absolutely. And support
congratulations, because it's like being able to push away the toxic people that keep you stuck in the addiction is like just so vital, even though it can be quite lonely.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Yes, and this was one of the things that I had to really come to terms with when I went through my trauma healing, is I had to detach from my family of origin, because my whole life I had made excuses for them. I had compassion. I thought I was the one that needed to change, and I did, but in certain ways, in the ways of loving myself and having more compassion for myself. Whereas before, I thought, and I was being told, I needed to have more love and compassion for my family. And they were the ones that were actually making me more sick. So after doing all this healing and looking, talking to my inner child and getting into those memories that I couldn't access before and seeing what they had really done to me, I was able to go, hang on, no, I don't need to have more compassion for them. I don't need to have these people in my life. I'm actually deserving of being free from them and having my own life. And detaching from these people was one of the biggest gifts I've ever had, because my life has thrived in phenomenal ways. And they were keeping me very, very sick. And there are people like that in the world. There are takers. There are a lot of sick people. They don't change. They can't self-reflect. I'm not trying to diagnose anyone, but my main goal now is to love myself, heal myself, stay on my path, and know that I'm enough and I don't have to be around anyone that I don't want to be around.
I love that. Absolutely love that. I remember in my life when I got to that point around, certain members in my family and stuff, and I was just like, can't do it. Can't do it. It's like, funnily enough, I was going to tell you this in the green room later, but I think this might be relevant to people out there too. I was looking on my Facebook memories. I don't look at them every day or anything. It just happened to be that I looked at it today, and there was a post that I put up, and it was just after I moved here to Adelaide. So this is going back 12 years ago. And my life had gone a little bit pear-shaped. It was not very helpful, not very smooth at this point. And I'd only been here 3 or 4 months, and I had booked flights to Perth. And I was sick as a dog. And I tried to do an interview before I went to Perth. And I got almost to the end of the interview, and all of a sudden I had a coughing fit and I couldn't stop. So it's safe to say I didn't get that job. And I was just like, I can't even search for work right now because I'm so sick. Yes. And I had no support, no financial support, I couldn't go onto Centrelink. I couldn't get anything because I was a Kiwi, and I was just like, fuck, what do I do? But I had these flights booked and paid for before all my money had gone. And I was staying with some friends, some childhood friends over there. And I put this post up on Facebook saying, well, flight out to Perth is on Thursday. Let's see what happens. And of the comments that were there, the people, 90% of the people that were back in New Zealand were both like, we're all like, it's okay to come home. You've made a mistake. It's all right to admit that you've made a mistake. You can come home.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that were here that knew me now were just like, no, see what Perth will do for you. Trust yourself. If this is what's going to help you out and keep you moving forward, then do it. Good luck to you. Well done.
Beautiful. That's so beautiful.
I know, right? And it's like just that one little post 12 years ago, and I can see very clearly on reflection where my support was laying and where my criticism and the judgment and the we're going to wait for you to come home with your tail between your legs stuff was coming from. And I was like, no wonder I didn't want to go back, you know.
Absolutely. That's so brave of you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad you did.
And just from those, in that moment, from the depths of my belly, even though everything was looking so terrible at that time, I just knew I had to stay. I knew I had to stay. Adelaide, I hadn't finished with Australia. I hadn't finished with Adelaide. It was like I had to be here. And I didn't know how things were going to work out. I didn't know what my life was going to look like and like tomorrow or even next week. I had no freaking idea. But I had to be here. And I just had to trust that whatever was going to happen was going to happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And much like yourself, I was so fortunate. I had key people that popped up at that time that were just like, we're here for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're here for you. We will take care of you. Don't go back to New Zealand. It's important that you stay here right now. We'll look after you. Don't worry.
Yes, absolutely. Those fundamental blocks that keep you going. Yeah. That keep giving you faith and hope that you're on the right path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so
Cindy's just asked the question if Adelaide feels like home now. Funnily enough, when I flew back into New Zealand, flew back from New Zealand in start of 2019, as I was flying into Adelaide, I was like, I'm home. So yes, it does feel like home now. That's why I sort of stumble when I talk about New Zealand and home, because it doesn't feel like home anymore. It's the place where I came from. It's a place where I could still go back to, and I miss the energy of the land in New Zealand. I very much miss that, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. Adelaide feels like home. So
special. Yeah. That's amazing. I'm glad that you've made a home here. That's amazing.
It took a long time though, because Adelaide is a place that's very, like the people of Adelaide are very, how do I say that? They're beautiful people. They're incredibly supportive, but they're also very cautious.
Yes.
Very cautious about opening up until you've sort of proved yourself. They're sort of like looking at you going,
Yes, I feel that. Yeah.
But once you're in, oh my goodness, they're just the biggest, widest, openest people you could ever imagine. But you have to sort of prove your worth first.
Yeah. Very beautiful and very giving people when you meet the right people and when you get into that trust circle. Absolutely.
Yeah. And Cindy, apparently, so I hear from some of my beautiful people still over in New Zealand, they've lifted all of the restrictions of stuff in New Zealand now because they want the tourist dollar back. So it's good time to go to New Zealand for a holiday.
I have been once when I was younger. I think I was about 12 and it was beautiful.
Yeah.
It's very lovely. It's a very nice place.
Yeah. Like I said, I miss the land a lot. And there are specific people there that I very much miss. But thanks to the wonders of technology, I still have contact.
Yes. How long has it been since you've been there?
What are we now? 3.5, nearly 4 years now.
Beautiful. Are you planning another trip?
Not for ages. No. Next big one's Canada.
Oh, wow. Yes. That sounds incredible. Please take me with you.
Take you along with my baggage handler.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my next place to go, because I haven't been there yet, and I certainly wish to go to Ireland and Scotland. They are my other two places that I wish to go to. Not on the same trip though.
Yes.
Yeah,
very nice.
Canada's
Very
next.
nice.
That'll be in a couple more years once things are settled down over there too.
Yes. See how
So
it
we
goes.
spoke a little bit about, what is really super important to you, and within that, I get that that's sort of where like the aim of your business of somatic healing comes in, and we sort of referred to it a little bit, but like if somebody was to come to you for and ask you, what is somatic? And I'll come back to that question from Timothy in a minute. So what is the aim of somatic healing?
The aim of somatic healing is to release the stored trauma that sits within our body. So there's trauma that we can't physically remember in our mind, but it sits in our body. And sometimes we can get physical sensations in our body and we might not know where it comes from. And to release the energy and the tension that sits in our body from the trauma. Yeah. To access it, to pinpoint it, to get in touch with our inner child and say, hey, what would you like to show me? And let me help you get that energy out. Let me help you heal this wound from your past.
I love that. Yes. Hi, Angelita. Funny story about that. So the other day on my Find You Fridays show, I spoke a little bit about an incident that had happened previously that night, which left me very angry, triggered some anger points. And when I went to stand up from the reading show, I got this massive pain in my left foot. It was like cramping.
Yep.
And I was like, ugh! And I sat back down again, couldn't get up. And I was very lucky the next day I was having a kinesiology session, an emotions and metaphysical kinesiology session with the beautiful Leanne Gravel from Amazing Life Strategies. And I have to say it was so fascinating because I spoke to her about this cramp that wouldn't really go away. I couldn't, it wasn't until I went to stand up that it was a problem. If I was sitting down, it wasn't a problem. I tried massaging it. I put my creams onto it. It just wouldn't fucking shift. And so she's doing her testing. So for anybody that doesn't know what kinesiology does, they muscle test you on a whole bunch of things, and they do it very quietly, and they just do muscle testing. And next thing you know, she's saying, so what happened with you when you were around about 4? Because there's some stuff around fear that's coming up around 4. And I was like, well, the first thing that pops into my mind is at 4 years old in New Zealand, we start school a lot earlier in New Zealand. So while here you start school anywhere from 5 to 6, in New Zealand it's like 4.5 to 5.5, anywhere in between there. So that was the first thing that popped into my mind. And also that I started at one primary school, and then my parents didn't, I was in a Montessori, and then my parents didn't feel like I was learning enough or was structured enough. So they ripped me out of that school, chucked me up to a mainstream school. To this day, I don't really recall that little bit of process. I know it happened, and I remember being at that school because I thought it was fun. It was a great school to be at, the Montessori one. I really enjoyed it. I remember that, and I remember being in their big, big classroom, but I don't really remember much more than that. And as she was going through, she realized that the point that was on my foot that was cramping was to do with my spleen meridian. And so she did some meridian work. And next thing you know, all of that stuff, all of the fear, all of the anxiety, which is what the spleen meridian's all about, was releasing just so beautifully and so gently. And so this is what you're saying, you know, these trigger points, these scattered memories, you know, it could be nothing related that could trigger that point, but it can be just something, and it's like boom, then your body is like boom, it's off again, and it's
reacted. Yes,
it's
absolutely.
Reacted in a big way. And I mean, I didn't get to go to bed that night until 2:30 in the morning because my foot was so sore.
Yes.
Yeah, I just couldn't do it. So yeah, it was really interesting. So thank you for bringing this into this world and in such a way that is like so kind and gentle, because trauma can be really hard and really harsh in the healing process.
Absolutely.
So we're lucky to have beautiful people like yourself. So I'd like to just jump back to what Timothy is asking there, and he would like to know, how does complex PTSD differ in the way it exhibits in people to regular PTSD, and how it affects their well-being?
That is a very good question. PTSD. Sorry, Kira, briefly, how would you say PTSD differs in the way it exhibits in people, how it affects their well-being? Yes, okay, that's a good question. So PTSD is usually one traumatic event. Say
a car crash.
Thank you. I was going to say losing a baby, and then I thought maybe not. A car crash, yes, great. A car crash. One traumatic event. You might go to the hospital. You might, see a counsellor. You might feel a bit scared about driving for a little while. There'll be some fear. There'll be some anxiety. You'll be able to see a psychologist. Maybe you'll talk to someone about it. You'll feel a bit better. It won't completely consume your life. It's one event. It will startle you and maybe, what's the word? Not discombobulate. Destabilize. It'll destabilize you for a while. Whereas complex PTSD is a series of traumatic events. So lots of traumatic events, and usually begins or can begin in childhood, and it is repeated traumatic events. And this could be as simple as the parent or caregiver repeatedly shaming the child, not getting enough of something, being neglected, being repeatedly put down, all these sorts of things. Or it could be sexual abuse as a child, repeated sexual abuse, constantly being homeless or, not having your needs met as a child, and then say being, constantly raped throughout your adolescence, or being picked on and bullied throughout school life, your parents constantly fighting, constantly shifting around, repeated traumatic events throughout your life. That's complex PTSD. And this is destabilizing throughout your whole life. It'll affect your whole adult life. It presents, and that's where usually hypervigilance, anxiety, depression, addiction, OCD, severe sleep issues, codependency, all those sorts of things will arise, because it completely completely destabilizes someone's whole entire world. Whereas PTSD would be more manageable, still horrific, but less destabilizing than complex PTSD. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Timothy. Yeah. And it's really interesting. I mean, we've said a car crash, but it's interesting because I wonder, where does so it's complex PTSD, is that strictly starting in childhood, whereas PTSD is more adult traumas that have happened through adulthood?
Not necessarily.
I'm thinking of people who like go off to war, and if they've been in war for a couple of years and they've seen some pretty horrific stuff. Thinking of my, ex-husband's dad, who was in Vietnam, and they saw some pretty nasty shit for a couple of years,
Yeah, and I feel that more people have complex PTSD than it is talked about or aware of. It's just not put out there and discussed as much. It's not analyzed. It's not what's the word? It's not open. It's more taboo. Someone says PTSD and they think of war vets, and and then it's kind of closed down a bit, And then if you mention to someone, oh, have you thought about you might have complex PTSD? And they go, oh, no, don't be silly. Of course I don't. But it's actually very common. And I can see in people when they are triggered, when they're in a fight, flight, fear, fight, flight, fawn, freeze stage. You can see when they are in this state, and that's complex PTSD. When they've had childhood trauma, when they go into one of these states, when they are reacting to something, you can see it. You can, if you know what to look out for. And now that I do, it's like my mind is constantly switched on to it. It is in so many people. So many people are walking around with it that just don't even realize it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, as you're talking, I'm just like, holy crap. There's a lot of those elements that I can see of why I chose, the first husband that I chose. That the level of narcissism was very normal to me.
Yes.
So yes. I chose the same to fill the gap, because I'd left home and it was just like, I can't cope without knowing how to, because I know how to handle that. I know how to be with that. I know how to manage that. And I know how it was my normal to be in that, like that level of narcissistic relationship.
Absolutely.
And so I found more of the same over and over again until I got to a point where I was just like, I can't do this now. I can't. And, and even moving to Australia was the first steps in that process, the first steps. But for me to actually fully target the narcissistic traits and the narcissistic stuff, that didn't actually happen until about mid-2020. So that was a big part of my journey. I'd already started on a feminine discovery journey and rebalancing out my masculine, my feminine energies, because the big part for me of my coping mechanisms was I was way into my masculine. And some of those things that you're talking about, like the OCD, like I was a neat freak. Do not fucking touch my stuff. I was an office manager at one point, and if somebody even used my stapler, I'd be able to tell. It's like I was so hyper protective of my possessions. Because of like, no, this is mine. Don't you fucking touch it unless I give you permission. Otherwise, we're fucking done. It's like nobody touched my stuff because they were just like, ooh. You know. And as you're talking, I'm like, I'm seeing so much. I can talk about it now from that space of laughter because I've done a hell of a lot of work and healing around all of that stuff. But I can certainly see those attributes we're playing out in my life for sure. For sure.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yes. And what I love exploring in somatic trauma is where it comes from. Where does the trauma come from? What element? And when I had done it to myself, when I have done my somatic healing myself, and I would be in my zone with my inner child, and we would be in this deep state of meditative healing, and I would get these beautiful voices in my head, you know, and we'd have these beautiful visualizations, and I would get a voice that would say, you know, when I was connecting with her so strongly because our trust grew so deeply, and a voice would come in when I was being shown the memory, and they would say, you know, this is the point where you learned shame, or where you were fundamentally shamed, where the shame was ingrained into your body. This was the part where you were taught that you weren't enough, or you weren't worthy. This was the point where you were stripped of your da-da-da-da-da. And we would go through these processes, because I would do this, you know, 8 to 10 hours a day, because the trauma, once the lid was off, so much wanted to come out. It was like opening Pandora's box, right? You can't put a lid back on it, you know, you can't unsee things, it doesn't stop. And so once I had freed her and said, I'm here and I want to hear you and love you through this so much. And it was so beautiful to see it's not actually me, you know, I'm not actually unworthy. Where does this feeling come from that I feel inadequate, that I feel that I need to make everyone like me, that I feel that I'm not doing a good enough job, that I feel I have to, you know, all these feelings that are inside of me, where do they come from? And this is the complex PTSD, that my mind is like, I'm not doing good enough. I need to be doing more. I have to work harder. I have to push myself. I'm not allowed to rest. Can I ever just give myself a break? But all of this actually stems from somewhere. It's learned. It's ingrained from me, you know, like it didn't just manifest out of thin air. And what I want to help people realize is that there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with them. And I want to help people learn and help to accept themselves as they are, because everyone is beautiful and special and unique, and they have their own magic inside of them, and they're so worthy of being whoever they are. They don't need to change and be better or be, you know, whatever someone else for someone else to like them or this or that. They are these beautiful, magical, magnificent human beings. It's just that for a long time we haven't felt that for a reason, and that's what we want to get out. We want to get out that trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you thank you thank you for putting that out into the world, because I agree 110%. I agree. You know, being able to be seen and heard,
yes,
is very high on my list of priorities. That was sort of where crafting possibilities began. And I definitely resonate with everything you just said there. Very much. I can see why you're on the show.
Thank you. You're so beautiful. Thank you.
Let's just shift gears just a tiny touch. So, because we have been on for an hour and 20 minutes, and I know that we dealt with my sound issues for the first half an hour or so. So which question. Yeah. All right. We're going to merge
I
these
know
two.
there's so many, right? There's so many wonderful questions.
So if you were to come across someone like either yourself when you're about 20 years old or someone else at that very start of like going, something's just, you know, that point where you said where you were standing outside and looking at the stars and you were, you know, in that space of like hardcore drunk and, you know, so lost and alone and angry and all of the stuff. Like, what would be the top tip you would give or piece of advice? I don't like saying advice, but maybe a little bit of a hint or a bit of guidance or empowerment of the steps that they can take forward next.
It's a really tough one because I believe that I suppose it depends. Am I coming across this person, or have they come up and asked me something? Because there's a difference.
I would say they've come to ask you.
Okay, they've come to ask me. That's different, because I don't go to people and meddle, because I believe that everyone is on a path. Like I was on my path to reaching a spiritual bottom that was necessary for me to changing and going upwards. But if someone, does that make sense? So like if I just saw someone, I wouldn't go meddle with their life. I might go up to them and say, hey, are you okay? You know, like if I saw someone on the side of the road, I'd go up and say, hey, are you okay? You know, but I don't meddle in people's lives, because everyone has their own divine path, which is, you know, might sound a bit cruel, but is necessary, like mine was. But if someone comes up to me and asks me, I'd say you are enough. I would say you are enough. And I guess it would depend on what advice they're asking for and what they're struggling with. I tell them that they're loved and that everything's going to be okay. That's my biggest advice. That's my biggest words to everyone, is that you are enough, you are loved, and everything is going to be okay. And that I strongly believe that everyone is capable of everything. Everyone has limitless potential inside of themselves. And once they tap into it, the magic explodes. You know, they just have to be willing. They have to be willing to let it in. Have to be willing to let it in.
Oh my goodness. You're just giving me tingles all over. Thank you, because I know for sure that there are so many people out there that they've never heard those words.
Yeah.
And I know it took me a long time to be able to receive those words as well. Absolutely. Yeah, my levels of receiving were very, very low when I began my journey. And I was constantly giving to other people, just trying to win their favor, it taps into all that people pleasing, you know.
Absolutely.
But when I was at a course, a 3-day course, and somebody said to me, and I'd learned some tools and techniques of how to tune into my awareness by this stage. And the person said to me, so, Truth, are you willing to receive from men? It was a no. And I was like, and then they said, Truth, are you willing to receive from women? And it was a no. And that shocked me. And it was like, Truth, are you willing to receive from yourself? And that was also a no. And so I was given a bit of a challenge to do over that 3-day course and to interact with men, because that was part of where the trauma had come from. And it had to be in a way like it was a body processes type course. So it was like to be able to receive from men was hard for me at that stage because my masculine was so high that they had no space in my world. So yeah, receiving.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
being able to receive those words of you are enough and you are loved is just like, love it. And here's the cool thing is that when your levels of receiving are lovely and high instead of really low, like through to the center of the earth, like mine were, and probably out the other side in the stratosphere, the beautiful things, like the other day when I was having a session, I was lying on my table back here and it started to rain, and the pitter-patter of the drops on the roof felt like they were fully coming through to my body, and the vibration was coming through to my body and contributing to the healing of my body. And it was just like, wow, thank you. And I was receiving from the sky, I was receiving from Mother Nature, even though I was inside the room. And you know, when you're intimate with someone, like you mentioned earlier, and you have that level of receiving where the lightest touch it's just the most delicious, magical thing you can imagine.
Absolutely.
You know, and it's like, it's no longer about, like, if you're actually in sexual intercourse, having your head slammed through the headboard anymore. It's about slow and gentle, and like that just gives so much more pleasure than boom, 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 you know.
Absolutely. Yes.
And that's carry on.
There's one more thing I'd like to say is that sometimes just sitting and being with someone or just listening to them is something really valuable and really special, because not everyone gets that, and not everyone had that growing up. And that feeling of having a voice and being heard and being acknowledged is sometimes just really fundamental. Sorry, that's my alarm. It's just really
self-care, people. It's like just time for bed.
Medication. Remind me, just listening to someone can be really important. Just sitting down and saying, hey, are you okay? And just listening to what they have to say and just letting them feel heard, and letting the inner child speak and share things with you is really important, because some people don't even have anyone to talk to. And the other advice or suggestion that I would give to anyone is to start small, go slow, and don't let the fear monster take over. You know, listen to your inner truth and know that you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. I love that, and I'm sure the audience will too. And thank you, Jeanette, for acknowledging the transformations that, you know, Kira and I have been through. It's huge. It is. And we're just happy to be here to be able to inspire any and everybody else to just keep going. I'd just like to quickly jump back to Angelita just quickly. And she said she's not sure if when people go back to drugs and alcohol, it's triggers from the past or it's just too hard in the now. So would you like to just have a quick chat about that one?
Yes, I would say that there's some underlying trauma that hasn't been explored and looked at and healed, to be honest. I would say. And you know, I want to remind anyone that listening that it's not their fault, and you're all beautiful and you're all so loved, and anything that you're going through, it's not your fault and you're not a bad person. Addiction doesn't make us bad people. It is a coping mechanism for something much deeper, much deeper, and it's not our fault.
Yeah, definitely. Agreed. It's so many people and therapists and things try to deal with the alcohol or the drugs, but they don't deal with the trauma that sits underneath. And that's quite common in the therapy world. Whereas a little bit like, somebody comes in to me and says, oh, I haven't got enough clients, or I'm having money issues, or I'm having trouble with XYZ. Okay, let's have a look at what's underneath that. What's being triggered? What's causing that block? And we dig down. We don't just sit at the top and try to deal with that, because it's just going to keep coming up over and over and over again. It's just going to keep reinventing itself because you're not dealing with the actual cause.
That's right. And I'm really glad. Sorry, go on. I'm really glad that you said that, because I have gone into this with no expectations, and it's not, although I, have a need to provide myself with a home. I'm currently staying with a friend. Everyone has a need to pay bills. This somatic healing is not a money-making scheme, and it says on my website, the first session is, or introductory is free. I sit down with someone, I have a lunch, I get to know them in a beautiful space, and then we talk about the money options based on what that earning is. So it's not this is my fee, and you pay it or you don't get the help, because everyone has the right to help and healing. And I have a very full life. This isn't the only thing that's going on, and this isn't my only means of making money. And this isn't, I'm not just doing it for money. I'm doing it because I want people to access and heal what's inside. And I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I love that you have that, and that you have the ability to do that. Yeah, for sure. So before I ask you the last question, which is a lovely light question often to end on, I'm just going to pause for a second.
Mm-hmm.
All right, sorry about that. So how can people get in touch with you, Kira, so that they can grab a session?
All my details are on my website, and I would recommend by phone, messaging or calling me on my phone. Not so much, if possible, by Facebook Messenger, just because I do get flooded with messages. So it's it'll take me a bit longer to respond. But I'm so happy for you to contact me by my phone, and the details are on my Somatic Healing website. Yes.
Beautiful. We'll make sure that is up in the description box and show notes, blah, blah, blah. Because I don't know that, I can't remember what we did put up in there. Either one. Alrighty. So last question. Before we allow beautiful
bring
people.
Bring it on.
So if you could sit next to any person on a park bench, and it's the most beautiful, perfect day ever, who would it be and why?
I'm so glad you asked this. This is like one of my favorite questions. I'm so glad you asked it. And P.S., this is my teddy bear, Lily. She's my healing bear. I love her, my inner child. She sleeps with me, and I cuddle her, and she's the best. I have a couple of teddies in my room. But to answer your question, if I could sit, this might make me emotional. We'll see how we go. If I could sit near anyone anyone, I would sit near my younger self and I would have a beautiful chat with her. And I do sit with her in my mind, and, you know, we cuddle and we have chats on the beach regularly, many times a day. But if I could do that in person, I'm going to start to cry. Yeah, if I could do that in person, I think that would be really magical.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I have a popple, which is my teddy. It's one of the toys that you could roll inside itself and to create a ball with it. So my popple I got when I was 10, and she's still with me now, and I'm 44, and she's traveled everywhere with me. And she sits in my bedroom next to my bed, and so I totally get it, you know. And they're the ones that have been with us through all of our stuff. We can talk to them. They don't, you know, answer back. They don't judge us. They don't, you know, you can speak aloud without any fear of retribution. And that's the gift of soft, cuddly toys, you know.
Absolutely. And my inner child, you know, once I connected with her and I realized how much I loved her, and she really showed me what love is, because I didn't really know what that was before. And she's the most important person in my life, and I would love to meet her.
I'm so happy that you came on to chat with us today, Kira. Thank you for, number one, being bold, being brave, and being you. Because if you weren't that for yourself, you wouldn't be able to be that for anybody else.
Absolutely. This is very true. I have to love myself before anyone else. And that is one of my daily mottos: love me first.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming on and having a chat and asking those incredible, wonderful questions. It was so cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. It has been such an honor. I feel so blessed to be here and to be in this space. Really, I feel so grateful. So grateful.
It's because you're amazing. They're amazing.
You're amazing. Everyone's amazing.
All righty. Thank you, everybody. I will be back on Friday with Find You Fridays, the lovely intuitive reading show at 8 p.m. Adelaide time. Nice way to wind up the working week, if that's what you have. So many of us entrepreneurs don't even really know what a Friday is anymore. And then back next week, we will be having Gillian Love, who is all about, she has a group called Voluptuous Venus, and it is all about having the self-love and acceptance, allowance, just the self-love of bodies in all shapes and sizes, and to make it normalized. You know, she's actually a nude model. Amongst other things, she does a whole bunch of other
beautiful.
It's one of the things that she does. Yeah, it's so super cool. So she's got this incredible group, and I'm really looking forward to having a great chat with her next week on Tasty Tuesdays.
Amazing.
In the meantime, everybody, get out there, do something tasty for yourself. Be bold, be brave, be you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.